Okay, in this core animator tutorial we're going to put together a character with a few animations, and here we have our character set up. We have all the assets saved with the @2x suffix, and let's go ahead and open up core animator. So the preferred way to work in core animator is to use the @2x suffix and just drag those only into core animator. Core animator will then generate the @1x assets automatically for you and keep those organized, so you can see that they're both in being managed by core animator right now. So we have both 1x and 2x assets. By default, core animator takes the file name to create the element names. So let's go ahead and start setting up this character. Make sure you get all your anchor points set as you go. And I'll just quickly go through this, setting the anchor point and the position in the places where I want. Okay, so now I have everything arranged and also the correct layer order. So I want to point out one thing. I've arranged everything roughly how I want it before I make any groups, and I'll show you why. So if I make a group out of this, so I've got my whole guy in one group, the initial bounding box of that group is defined when you first group an item. So let's say I forgot to duplicate these wings, and I want these wings to extend out on this other side. So let's do that. Duplicate, and that'll reflect it over, and drag it over to its position. So you'll notice that that wing extends past this bounding box, and that's just the nature. Even though it's inside of this group, that's just always how it's going to be. It won't dynamically adjust. It will always take the initial state of the first time you group something. So keep that in mind. If it bugs you, then let's maybe go ahead and duplicate this before we make our group. Okay, so now I think we've got a pretty good setup here. So let's go ahead and group him and name the group. Let's call it Fairy Front View. Right now that's all we're going to work with in this simple example, but we may later have a side view for additional stuff. Not quite. So there's a few more things let's set up so we can animate individual different things. First of all, I want his legs to be set up together in one group so I can animate them all together. So let's select all those three, and then you can either hit group or Command G, and that will give you what we're calling leg left or leg L. Then let's also hold shift and select these three items. Command G to group, and then we will rename that leg R. Let's define our anchor points for the leg groups up here. I also want a little bit more control, so I want these bottom two sections also to be a group. I'm going to call those leg L2. And I need to define the anchor points of those. Do the same thing on the right leg. Leg R2. And define the anchor point. So now I've got a number of ways to control the legs. I can do the whole thing, I can do just the bottom half from the knee, and of course I can always just do the boot from the ankle. So let's undo those, Command Z to undo. And I'm going to do a similar organization on the arms. Let's go ahead and do that. So we only have two segments here. Arm L, define the anchor point. And then group that and call it arm R and define the anchor point. So I've got the wings, arms, legs, torso, head, and I think that is all I need. In this project, we're going to create 3 animations. One ambient, where the character is just breathing and waiting around. Another animation will be a flying animation that the user can take control of and drag around. And then a landing animation when the user drops in. So let's go ahead and make the first one. So make the first animation, let's just call it ambient. And you'll notice that our timeline pops up. And we can use these zoom tools to see what we're doing here. Okay, so let's go ahead and select the torso, and we're going to create a breathing animation. So I bring the playhead out here to 1 second, and I'm going to lock this scale together. I'm selected on the torso, and I'm just going to increase the scale, maybe to 104. And as long as I have this blue line, which is the skim bar, I can skim through and see the preview of the animation. So that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to exhale back down to 100% a little bit faster, so we'll do it 1.5 seconds. And now we have to breathe in, breathe out, and then I want him to pause for maybe a full second before he breathes in again, so I'm just going to go out to 2.5 seconds and stamp a duplicate keyframe so nothing changes here. You'll notice there's no tween line. And that looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and loop that so that that will just continually happen. That looks pretty good. The arms are not quite matching. I didn't put them in the same group. I want them to have a little bit of differentiation. I don't want them to grow. I want them to move with the chest, but not necessarily grow with the chest. So let's animate those position-wise. So you can use the values here. You can drag around manually, or if you want fine movements, you can use the arrow keys, and you can use the shift arrow keys if you like as well. So there's the left arm. Right arm, let's move that up and out a bit. So let's see how that looks. Let's zoom in to see how that looks. Notice the arms just subtly kind of move with it. And I'm going to have them move back to their initial position, which will be 0, 0, because this translation is defined translation from the setup value. So let's get those back, and let's stamp a keyframe out here at 2.5 seconds and loop those just so we're on the same time scale and they're both looping at 2.5 seconds. So that looks pretty good. I can preview by hitting enter and seeing preview of the animation. Looks pretty good. Only other thing I'm going to add is maybe have the wings move, just rotate a little bit as that's happening. So I'm going to go to 1.25 seconds, which is obviously half of 2.5, and I'm going to make the wings kind of, well, let's rotate the wings at 1.25 seconds. Let's rotate that one that way, this one that way. Do the same with this side. I'll just keep it subtle. And since I did 1.25 seconds, which is half, I'm just going to play auto reverse on those. You just click twice to get to the auto reverse, and then they'll be on the same time scale. So everything will be lined up with 2.5 seconds so far. So enter to preview that. Looks good to me. Last thing I'm going to add is I want him to maybe tap his foot, grow a little impatient if the user waits a really long time leaving him in the animation, or in the ambient animation. Okay, at 6 seconds, I'm going to work with his right leg and stamp a value for rotation. Also going to stamp a value for rotation for his boot. And then I'm going to have him lift, kind of rotate his leg up for a half second. He's also going to rotate his boot up at that same time. And then take a quarter second to tap the boot back down. So I'll rotate back down to 0. So let's see how that's starting to look. Tap. Then let's raise back up. And quarter second back to tap. Raise back up. And tap back down. So let's see, how many is that? So we've got lift up, tap, tap, tap. That's looking pretty good. We'll add a little pause. And we'll stamp a value here. And bring his leg rotation back. So let's see how that looks. Tap, 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 and back. Maybe at the same time I'm going to have his arm kind of raise up too as well. So let's work with this. Let's do the left arm. 6 seconds, stamp value, rotation. Let's also stamp a value for his forearm rotation. And then so let's lift his arm up, rotate his arm up. At the same time, let's rotate his, just kind of put his hand on his hip a little bit. I don't know. That works. Keep those values to there. And then go back to zeros out here at 9 seconds. Zoom out a bit, see how that looks. Looks pretty good. And one last thing, I need to remember to loop those as well. And this one needs to loop at the same time, so I'm going to alt drag to duplicate that keyframe out there. And I think we're done with our ambient animation. So we can preview that in the export pane. And 6 seconds comes along, taps impatiently, and goes back. Looks perfect. Okay, to complete this project we need to make 2 more animations. One where he's flying, and one where he's landing. And since we've already gone over the basic steps of animating different things, I'm just going to do a quick time lapse of me creating those other 2 animations, and then we'll look at the final product. Okay, here we have our final project set up with the ambient animation, a flight animation, and a landing. Let's just go ahead and look at those in the export module. See that we verified this was working. Turn on the flight and the landing. The landing will auto trigger that to go off. We'll go over that next in the implementation video for the developer in Xcode. And that's all for this design tutorial of the Garden Guardian project. We hope it was helpful. Thanks.